you really have to sort of niche down, but the first question to ask yourself is, who is the customer? Right? Because if you identify who the customer is, your crop plan is going to be, derived from what you think the demand might be and how you can set yourself apart from your competition, which in our minds is not the other local growers. It's the wholesaler who is bringing in all the imports. What can we sell and what can we provide that they cannot produce? That's what makes us more competitive. And I think anyone who's growing in flowers, at least, should be thinking about that first before they start thinking about just going to a farm. I mean, going to a farmer's market is great, but if you want to sell to floral designers, you've got to get more creative about what you're growing.
Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Sarah Daken and Tom Precht to the Growing for Market podcast. Tom and Sarah are the prime movers behind two farm businesses, Aquaponics Sustainable Floriculture and Grateful Gardeners Flower Farm in Poolesville, Maryland, which is in the orbit of the sprawling Washington, D.C. metro area. They both made the switch from very different careers to farming, which is one of the many things that I want to ask them about today, in addition to what the heck aquaponics is and how they were motivated to start the only all-flower aquaponic farm that we know of. However, before we get into all of that, I want to say welcome, Tom and Sarah, to the Growing for Market podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Andrew.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. I just can't wait to hear more about your story. It sounds very interesting because, Tom, I know you have a PhD in neuroscience and you were working in that field. And Sarah, you were a practicing attorney for over 2 decades. How did you both get from such different careers into flower farming?
Yes.
We ask ourselves that sometimes too.
Yes.
I bet you do.
How does anybody migrate late in their life to farming? I think is a very interesting question to ask. Yeah. So the reality of the situation is we have to always kick this back to my mom, who she's been growing flowers for more than 30 years. We used to live in, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, we lived in Canby, Oregon, which is right. That is where Swan Island Dahlias is housed. That's a fairly famous dahlia grower. So my mom got hooked on dahlias and that at that time of her life, so again, this was 30 years ago. I'm 43 now. God. Yeah. But she got hooked on them and she'd been growing them then recreationally, just for fun. And, just because she's a gardener and she'd grow other things, but that was kind of her passion. And now she's in retirement and she wanted to start her own cut flower farm as her retirement goal, I guess. And so she's based in Colorado. That's where I'm originally from. And she took the Floret course, the Aaron Benzaking Floret course. Mm-hmm. It was very famous and, Aaron's blown up now, of course. But she took that course and she got super excited about it and she wanted to share it with us. And we were like, oh, okay, sure. And that kind of just spurred us to say like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. Like, we like being outdoors. We like being in nature. We like growing things. So we started trying it and tested, a few things the first year and got really into it. And it sort of then just morphed, as it was kind of a side project, something that Sarah and I could do together as a married couple that did not involve our kids. We just really got into it. I think it was just, I think it's a similar story to how people end up being growers or farmers. They just start getting into it. They love to grow and then they see like, oh, there's so many things to try. There's so many plants to try and grow. Nature's always throwing curveballs at us. We can always be improving our methods and trying to be more eco-friendly and environmental minded. So that's really sort of at the core of, I think, what we did and why we did it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell. I mean, it kind of ballooned out of control really quickly. It just, and not to say it in a negative context, but it just, I don't think we initially intended on going in hardcore into a complete life-changing career path, nor even a profitable, mindset. I mean, it was mostly let's grow stuff and have some fun together and figure out how this goes. But, as anyone who's listening to this, who has done any farming, even a small little entry into something small, you have some costs that you have to put out to even start that. It's not a huge cost, to get started, but it's something. And I remember thinking at the time, it'd be kind of nice to sell some of these flowers so that we could, recoup our costs of what we're trying to do. And so we just kind of dove in and really, we dove into as much as of Aaron's course that we watched while we were visiting his mom, but then in addition, introducing ourselves to every flower farmer we could find in our region. And literally going to their farms and offering to help and peppering them with questions and trying to just read. We started buying books and how, is this really possible to do this? It just seems like it's maybe possible. Yeah. So, and so for the first year, it was really just about, we didn't have any land. We lived in a suburban neighborhood with tiny little postage stamp yards. We didn't even own that property. We were renting a house there. And so my parents owned a 1 acre property in about 20 minutes from us. And we would drive back and forth. We'd work full time all day. We'd come home. We'd make dinner for our kids. We'd throw everybody in the car. We'd go and just spend our evenings working there and then come home dog tired. And every weekend, Saturday and Sunday was spent, just continuing to do it. And it was exhausting and physically demanding, but we also felt really a lot of joy doing it. And that was the piece that just kept bringing us back. It feels amazing to do something totally different with our time. Yeah.
It wasn't about money.
Not initially. It's easy to get reeled into the fantasy of farming when you don't have to pay your bills with the money.
Right.
And so, it's gone from the evolution in the last 6 years has been quite, vast, because you start off, in one way and you kind of, like anything, you pull the curtain back on something and you start to realize, wow, this is going to be a lot harder than it looks. This is going to cost a lot more money than we thought, and all of the things. So we won't get into all that right now, but yes, that it's been, when I look back on where we started, it's kind of like, wow, 6 years. That's unbelievable. A lot has happened.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I think that's pretty typical, might not be the right word to use, but that, people get drawn into farming for the passion, and then, basically nobody gets into it for the business side of things, but then, you realize you got to work out the business side of things, right, to keep it going, or else you're just going to get burned out.
Yeah.
Okay. So from that, you have developed 2 farm related businesses, out of that, Grateful Gardeners and Floraponics. We'll want to talk about both businesses separately, but can you briefly line out for us what the 2 businesses are?
Yeah, so there is some intention there, obviously. Grateful Gardeners was the original cut flower farm, or what we would call an organic, sustainable cut flower farm that we formed in 2018. So that was the very first entity. And that goal was strictly to just grow out in the field, practice organic methods, try to be as sustainable as we could, and then supply cut flowers locally. So that was a very simple, I guess, idea of doing what a lot of people were doing after taking the Floret course, starting the farm business and selling cut flowers. And so that it made a lot of sense. We practiced that business solo for, I think, 2 or 3 years, but we were very big into getting access to as much resources and support as we could, because obviously you just need that in farming. But also we had a vision for trying to turn the tide within the floral industry, because I think anybody who gets into it starts to realize it's dominated by imports and it's incredibly carbon heavy, and it's about 10 or 15 years behind food in terms of organic practices. We still know plenty of farmers around here that are spraying Roundup and using a lot of pretty bad stuff. And so we saw some issues there that we could maybe help move the industry forward on some regenerative and sustainable practices. And so Grateful Gardeners had that mission. And so we got involved in the local community. We got involved in a incubator program called Bethesda Green, which was incredibly valuable to us. They're a nonprofit based in Bethesda, Maryland, and they help green businesses grow and evolve and get access to funding and all those things. That was a huge boost for us. Mm-hmm. So we did a 6-month curriculum with them. And at the end of it, they gave us a $10,000 award and became one of the residency companies. And so that was and we still to this day access that resource.
It really took us from hobby growers to thinking about this in terms of business. I mean, we did it soon enough into the journey that I think that the mindset shift was necessary if we were going to do it on any kind of, with any seriousness, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, we could have grown flowers and still sold them small scale, but you're just side hustling at that point. You're probably not even covering your costs. But it was like, if we're going to get serious about this, we need to get serious about how to run a business, and we need to really understand how to do that. So, and
I would strongly encourage any farm out there that is wanting to be a serious farmer to try and get into programs like that, because they really do teach you the nuts and bolts of running a business, and like what it really takes. Because honestly, so many people have great ideas and are talented growers or just whatever, but they're not great business people, because you don't get taught that, like in school.
Absolutely.
It's just not a skill set that is taught, you have to go seek it out if you really want it. And it is so important to being successful as a farmer. It really is. So we did that, but at the core of what we're trying to do is we are trying to innovate. I am a scientist. I'm a researcher at heart. That's what I wanted to do with my life. And I got away from it because I had to make money, and that sucks. And it sucked my life. And then once we returned to farming, I was like, I want to get back into R&D. I want to get back into trying to create new things and test new ideas. And so I started looking into what is the most sustainable way you can grow plants. And that's what led me down the path of hydroponics and then aquaponics. And there's a distinction there for sure. But basically that's what created a whole new entity eventually, which is Fluoroponics. We had gotten grant funding around 2021 to build a commercial scale system in a greenhouse in a controlled environment, and to start growing flowers in aquaponics, which, as you mentioned earlier, nobody's really doing or had been doing. And so the goal now, and this is, we can talk more about this because it definitely gets at the whole heart of business, is Grateful Gardeners has one mission, which is to grow, I think, beautiful things in an organic and sustainable way, sell them to the local community, encourage people to buy local, to, care about the environment, care about where their products come from, their crops. And then Fluoroponics is more the technical R&D, pushing the innovation of growing sustainably, and then trying to do that at a larger scale. Because ultimately, the only way that you can impart massive environmental impacts is if you scale those technologies. I mean, yes, small little impacts here or there always help. It always helps for us to do our little parts that we can. But I think we're all starting to see that until we do things at a much larger scale in terms of regeneration and sustainability, the impacts are going to be small. And I think that we're ready to try and do something much bigger. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, the two businesses have sort of, in part, were created out of necessity because having them commingled was going to require us, if we were going to seek equity funding or any kind of funding, right, for the company, we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose our interest in Grateful Gardeners, that that was sort of like the mother plant. And the baby plant.
Good analogy.
Yeah, the baby
Good
plant.
Analogy. Yeah.
Yes, the baby plant has been Fluoroponics, which we are seeking funding for, which we are not so alarmed about giving up some of the equity of that company. So, it was really more of a mechanism of trying to make sure we protected the interests of Grateful Gardeners, which is what caused us to create a separate spin out of Floraponics for legal and business reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, both businesses are producing flowers. It's just that one is using a specific technology that could be scaled in a way that traditional agriculture, field grown floriculture would probably not be able to.
Uh-huh.
It's more challenging to scale it.
You could, but you just need more and more land. You just keep growing, getting everything bigger. If Floraponics, you would need to get bigger greenhouses per se, but you can also increase production in a smaller space because of the technology. It's such that you could actually scale that system in a much smaller footprint.
Okay. Well, that does make sense, and especially since you guys are really doing some things differently than almost anybody I know. I mean, I've been to aquaponic greenhouses, especially a long time ago when I was working in the seed industry and went on more farm tours and greenhouses. But I cannot remember anybody running a aquaponic greenhouse that was had much, if anything, for flowers in it. So, is it the idea that you're going to get like funding that through aquaponics so you could try out new technologies or like really get the process down, and that way if you're trying some experimental stuff, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't affect the sort of like farm side of the business, that allow you to try some new things without the pressure, because that's one thing about farming is like I think most growers that I know like to try different things, but you can only do so much trying when it's on a field that affects your bottom line.
Right.
This is I would say if we're at a pivot point right in this moment, that's the pivot point we're in, because or maybe I might call it a pain point, to be honest, because we have used grant funding to build the thing. Right, we've got a 30 by 60 greenhouse, which is completely outfitted with aquaponics. It is growing flowers as we speak. But the technology being what it is, the micronutrient profile being required for flowers, it's a little bit different. And because Tom is sort of first in line at trying this, there is an R&D component that will continue to exist. You don't just build it and then just like get scaled immediately and you're just pumping out flowers like crazy. I mean, it is going to take some time to refine the processes that are associated with that system. And, we're in the middle of a fundraising, effort right now. And, we could have another podcast on what that actually looks like, which has been a lot of, well, there's a lot to say about that. But what I will say ultimately is that, we are not in a position right now for Grateful Gardeners to continue to be able to provide the funding for aquaponics without additional funding from some outside source, because we could be the road to profitability for Grateful Gardeners, even with all the scaling we've done, would be tricky because those margins are not super big. Right. They're there, but that would even be tricky on its own. But then for the Grateful Gardeners revenue to be also supporting the costs associated with this greenhouse and the R&D that is necessary to continue to produce the data needed to scale it, we're in a tricky spot, to be honest. I mean, that's where we're currently at. And that's been, I just wrote a huge blog post, in fact, about our fundraising efforts. And it was more, I always call them rant posts, really, because it's no joke to try to get people willing to part with their money on an agricultural project, especially with flowers. I mean, food is a space where people are much more likely to allow for grant funding and some things. But when you start talking about floriculture, people kind of get glazed over a little bit. So that's been really hard. It's been hard.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because flowers are such an important part of like the farmers market scene, and I mean just of like they're an important agricultural product, and yeah, unfortunately some people I know for whatever reason are sort of like you can't eat them, so they don't give them the same importance. But yeah, flowers are super important. In fact, I read part of Sarah's, I think, of that blog post. I don't know if you would. It was very interesting hearing what I don't think I read the whole thing, but I don't know if you want to talk about it at all. But I know you're talking about talking with some green, like an investment firm or something like that wanted to do green projects, and them saying to you, I can't see this returning 10 times over 3 years. So like, we probably don't need to keep talking. Like, I don't know if that's something you want to talk about, but yeah, it sounds very stressful, and to be trying to doing the grant, fundraising side of things. So
I think we don't really have, well, let me just say, how should I start this? I don't want this to completely dominate the conversation, but, and I don't want to, well, Tom, how are we going to get on this podcast to not be complete Debbie Downers today on this whole issue? But we also sort of operate in a space of wanting to be really transparent and really honest with people about this stuff. And because it is hard, and that is the reality. And no matter how many classes you take that sell the flower farming dream, at the end of the day, you need to figure out how you're going to pay your bills. And if someone else is not paying the bills from some outside income, which is, I hate to say this, but I think oftentimes what is the case.
No, it is. I mean, the USDA has documented that clearly.
I just think that, you have to start really telling people the truth. And it doesn't mean that people are going to not do it. It just means that we need to approach it, and we need to approach the way to fund it differently, which means we need to start asking for our legislators and policymakers and for private business to start thinking about agriculture in a different way. So one of the things that we've been focusing on is just trying to find the unicorn impact investor, which is not something that is easy to find. There are people out there that have lots of...
Why don't you define what an impact investor is? Because not everybody knows that.
So an impact investor, as opposed to just sort of a venture capitalist, is going to seek to put money into projects that give them maybe a less of a return. So you're not going to see a 10x return in 3 years, like you might out of a Silicon Valley tech startup. But you so the impact may be lower. You could still get to profitability, but it may take longer, because agriculture takes longer to turn a profit. And it may be that what you get in exchange for the reduction in your return is an environmental impact that actually has a larger ripple effect on the overall environmental metrics that people are trying to achieve, right? So the problem is I feel like we're in the midst of a lot of greenwashing, both on large scale companies and small scale investors. It doesn't really matter. Everybody loves to say that they support agriculture, including politicians. Everyone loves to say that they support, food, insecurity issues. They want to address those issues. It's all the verbiage is out there. And it's great marketing. But at the end of the day, and my blog post made the point that if all you're really interested in is a 10x return in 3 years, like a VC, then you're not really looking to be an impact investor, and you're not really making the environmental impact that important. Because if it's what it's really about is money, this is probably not going to be the space in which you're going to get the best return for your buck. And that is just a hard, cold reality. And what it means is that you have to seek investment from people who are oriented around impact more than they are around just making a lot more money, right? So there's a mindset shift that I think is starting to happen in the investment world, but I think we're just on the front end of that. I don't think, and because the economy sort of is a little bit insecure as well, with inflation and all kinds of other things going on. This investment world is constantly changing, and it's volatile. So we're in a space that is already insecure and volatile, asking for people to take a chance on an environmental project which could have huge impact, but may not get them the money that they thought they might get from somewhere else. So does that make sense?
Yeah. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, it's that everybody wants to say that they're like doing green projects or whatever, but when the rubber hits the road, it sounds like you've talked to a lot of people where the money is actually more important. Like, it'd be great if they could support an environmental project and also get this 10x return. And if they can't get the money along with it, they're not interested, which really isn't that green. So, we probably could do a whole episode about grants and things like that, because it's interesting. In the current magazine, we have an article talking about a different kind of grant that you're going for, but grants from food security organizations, so that people can get grants to offset donating food on a regular basis, treating them almost like a restaurant account or a CSA or something like that, to like food pantries and things like that that serve people who don't have enough to eat. And one of the points that the person made in that article, which I thought was helpful, she said, it's not easy to go out and get grants, but it's also not easy to network with restaurants all winter long. It's like you can either spend your time, none of them have a guaranteed payoff. You can either spend your time networking with potential customers, you can spend your time networking on grants and things like that. But I think flowers, especially, you have the deck stacked against you, because there's a ton of money that goes into American agriculture. Unfortunately, most of it goes into subsidies for the big crops, corn and soy and cotton to a lesser extent, all the big ones. And then flowers also have the subsidies, the Central American production that's subsidized. So flowers kind of like have two strikes against them. And like me personally, I'm not hoping to see the same kind of subsidies for, say, vegetables or flowers. I just want the playing field to be leveled, right? Because, essentially we're like pouring money into the subsidization of the crops that are the least healthy for the planet and people to eat them. The way I look at it, it's like subsidizing the raw ingredients of junk food. I mean, I think that's why our processed foods are so cheap. That's a whole nother. Yeah, sorry, I don't. I want to talk about what you guys are doing, but I feel it. Like flowers, I think flowers are in a uniquely difficult spot, just because not only do they not have all the subsidies going to them, but the Central American production is actually subsidized. Which I know you guys, just from looking at your website, you talk a lot about how flowers are flown into this country. There may be more flowers flown in than grown here. Like I see that hashtag, for example, on social media, hashtag grown not flown and things like that, by people pointing out how important that is. But I bet you, like here we are sitting, like we're doing this interview the day before Valentine's Day. I bet like your average floral customer probably has no idea how much of the flowers that are about, going to be given tomorrow got flown into the country. And how many flower growers went out of business when I forget what year, I think it was in the 90s that the whole idea is that they would subsidize flower production and that would take away from the market share for cocaine production or illegal drugs or whatever. Yep. And I'm not sure how effective that's been, besides the fact that I think maybe all it's doing is put a bunch of flower growers out of business and making it harder for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that, and I do think it feels like such a critical issue to really sort of pull the curtain back on, because of the financial difficulty of really being profitable in this business. And there are people like Tom and I, we've pivoted from careers where we were making a lot more money. And we are both now full on in this journey and trying to figure out how to make this work so that we aren't basically living like a couple of, having to sell all of our things just to survive. I mean, it just, like that should not be necessary to farm full time. You should be able to make a livable wage in this industry, like any other profession. And it right now, the reality of doing that with no outside funding, meaning no one's funding it from another income, no grant funding, no equity investment, nothing, just pure revenue generation is, I feel like, almost a path to bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And no one wants to say that out loud, but it's I think a reality that needs to get talked about more frequently.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think farming is undervalued, as a profession. So that might be a third strike, against flower growers, is that just in general, I think farming is undervalued. You can definitely make a living at it, but you have to be very deliberate, it's not, sounds like you guys are, and that's a problem, is that people get involved in it for the passion, right? And then don't think about what the path forward to is profitability. So at least sounds like you guys are in the thick of it, but at least you got, it sounds like you guys have a plan, and you're trying to figure out how to become profitable in the long run. Cause it's a lot better than, working your fingers to the bone and then realizing you're out of money one day. So wish you best of luck with all of it sounds like you're trying a lot of strategies there. Best of luck with all of them.
Thank you.
So if people may not even know what aquaponics is, could you tell us what aquaponics is and also what your aquaponics system is like? Because I think there's a few different ways to run one. And I'd like to hear about yours.
Absolutely. So I think a good distinction to make first is the difference between hydroponics and aquaponics. Okay. So basically both methods are growing plants in water. So soilless mediums. Primarily. But the difference is in hydroponics, the farmer is the one who's adding the nutrients to the system, adding the fertilizers, adding the things the plants need. So they're almost like a cook in the kitchen. They're a little bit of nitrogen, a little bit of phosphorus, potassium, pinch of calcium, pinch of sulfur, so they're the ones that are trying to sort of tweak that nutrient profile to maximize growth. In aquaponics, it's a hydroponic system that is coupled with an aquaculture system. And so fish are being farmed and being grown in large tanks, which is something that happens all the time anyway. The terrestrial fish farming is very common, and actually a really good way to generate, essentially good protein stock. And they have a really good feed to weight ratio. Basically, you don't have to feed them as much to get nearly as much nutrients and protein out of them as you do, beef and pork. Anyway, aquaculture systems, the fish are generating waste, right? They're excreting nitrogen out of their gills. They're producing, biosolids. And that waste needs to get converted into some form that is not toxic for the fish. I mean, you can imagine what's going on in like a pond, right? So like just a regular old pond out somewhere, there's fish in there and they're excreting waste. How are they not dying from their own waste? Well, there's bacteria. There's bacteria that exist in the air, the water, the soil that are taking those, it's essentially ammonia, and they're converting that nitrogen waste into a form of nutrients that plants can absorb. And that's essentially going from ammonia to nitrates. And so that's what we're harnessing in these aquaponic systems. We're sort of amplifying and growing up this bacterial population that then is converting all of this nitrogen waste into a form that plants can use. That nutrient-rich water is being cycled to the plants. The plants are absorbing it, and then they're returning the water back to the fish clean. And that's like that cycle just repeats indefinitely. And so the reason that is the most sustainable way to grow is essentially it's a closed loop. You have to put fish food in, right? You got to feed the fish. But after that, it's a self-perpetuating cycle that reaches a harmonious balance. And there's some tweaking, a little pH adjusting here or there, or maybe you have to add a little bit of nutrients here or there. But generally speaking, these systems are highly sustainable. You don't have to purge or take out any water. And in hydroponics, you do have to do that. And so it's like a 99% water savings over field grown with aquaponics, which is insane, right? Like, I mean, huge water savings, especially for those drought-stricken areas like, California is experiencing. At least recently they have the opposite problem now.
One extreme or the other.
Right. Yeah. So there's a huge amount of water savings that happens there. You only have to basically replenish what is lost to evaporation. You can see as much as a 2x growth rate increase because there's everything the plant needs is right there. You can control all the different variables. There's obviously, you don't weed anymore. There's no weeding, which is amazing. Less pest pressure because you're in a controlled environment, so you use less pesticides. Obviously, you've got to be completely organic because you can't add anything that's going to be toxic to the fish, to aquatic organisms. So it's all organic. You can grow year round because you're in a controlled environment. You're in a greenhouse or you're indoors somewhere. And that's mandatory because you've got to have controlled temperatures for both the fish and the plants. And then you can grow everything at waist height. So a farmer doesn't have to bend over anymore to harvest and do their job. That's huge. That's huge because we have already done 5 years of bending over chronically and our backs are killing us, and everybody complains about that. So that's essentially what is the core of aquaponics. It is this highly sustainable closed loop system that has a myriad of environmental impacts, but also improves the quality of the crops that you produce. It can increase the growth rate so you get that many more harvests per year over the field grown. And there's still a lot that can be improved upon in these systems. One of the key factors to the whole thing is oxygenation. So a lot of people get confused by that, right? They're like, wait, plants absorb CO2. What's this oxygen stuff you're talking about? Well, the green part of plants absorb CO2. So everything above ground will absorb light and convert CO2 to sugars and photosynthesize and all that. The roots need oxygen. They're respiring, right? They're going through natural respiration similar to our cells. And so they need oxygen. And that's usually the biggest problem when plants are not healthy, when they're not doing well. It's oftentimes the oxygen, especially in soil, right? Like we want good porous, loose soil that can pull air through the soil and pull oxygen in. And when the soil's compacted and it's clay and it's you can't get a lot of oxygen in there, that's when roots really suffocate and starve. And they can't absorb nutrients, they die. So we are pumping oxygen throughout the entire system at all times. And this obviously makes logical sense for fish, right? Like fish have to breathe oxygen through the water. So you want oxygen for them. That's mandatory. But you also want it throughout every other aspect of the growing system as well. You want oxygen in all of the different areas that you can pump oxygen. So we're constantly infusing oxygen everywhere we can. So that's a key factor. If you're doing that correctly, your plants are going to be that much happier and you're going to get better absorption, better health. So that was a long explanation. I hope that made some sense. Our system is basically 2 large fish tanks in one corner. Both are 500 gallons, 1,000 gallons total. We're growing koi, comet goldfish, and basically just common goldfish, like just regular old big. They just get nice and fat and huge. But the reason you do koi and goldfish is they're super hardy. They can tolerate temperature swings down to 35 degrees all the way up to 95 degrees. They can tolerate pH range. And you can think about that too. Like koi are used in ornamental ponds. So they're meant to be outdoors where you can get massive temperature fluctuations throughout the year. So they're just really good hardy fish to start a system with. However, a lot of people use, tilapia, trout, salmon, fit more what you would call food fish, right? Because that's
what I've heard of more.
Yeah, it's definitely a more common thing, and it's a revenue source, right? So you're not only generating a crop out of the hydroponic system, but you're also generating a crop out of the aquaculture system, and so that's an additional revenue source. Not to mention, there's also the possibility of pulling off biosolids from the system, and those biosolids, essentially, that's liquid manure, right? And so that is a fertilizer in and of itself. Now, you can continue to extract nutrients out of that and return it to the system, but you can also pull it off and then use that as an inoculant and fertilizer out in field-grown operations. So it's another source of revenue is to pull that biosolid fertilizer off. Then, it's all around just a really powerful technology that I think, unfortunately, there's a high cost to getting started in it, right? You can do it on a DIY scale, which I, of course, did. Like, we have documentation of me, with these ghetto DIY systems in my garage, literally in my garage.
It's rather hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you do, right? Like, when you first start in on something, you have no money to put into it. You build something. You're like, hey, we're going to try something. You test it. Failure, a little bit of success. And then you just start, iterating, you start improving it, you start trying new systems. And that's really what we did. But the gist of it is you have fish growing in one area, you move water into the plant systems. They're in troughs. In our case, we're using what's called deep water culture. It's 4 to 6 inches of water. And then you've got rafts that sit on top and the roots go down into the water. And that's where all that nutrient-rich water is flowing. And you've got oxygenation. And that's really all it is. And then it's just a matter of pumps, just moving that water from one place to another and then recirculating and then constantly doing that. There's some other nuance to it, but I've said enough. I think that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, what about the fish? Are the fish there? Are they being sold or anything? Or they're just there to make fertilizer, basically?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, because this system is a pilot system, and we're really still testing the plant aspect of it, we are not doing anything with the fish other than just keeping them happy and alive.
They're super cute, though.
They are. They're getting nice and fat and happy.
They're big. They're huge. Some of them are huge now, and the koi, the ornamental koi, are stunning.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like works of art. They're so beautiful.
Yeah. I mean,
well. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of koi. I know there are some that are amazingly beautiful, which is why people have them, right? I mean, is that have you ever considered? Could they be like sold into the I don't know what to call it, the pet market, or the people who want koi for their ponds? I mean,
yeah,
right? You could.
You absolutely could.
Yeah, you could. I think it's about, how many do you have at any given time to actually sell. So I don't think it's really something that we would consider. At some point, the balancing act with these systems is such that if the fish get too big and, the plants, you're constantly having to sort of monitor, is there too much waste for the plants to absorb, or are there not enough plants to absorb the waste, right? So there's a bit of a balance there. If your fish get too large, you're going to have to purge them from the system and probably start with some smaller guys.
There's a natural maintenance that you have to get to where it's like you've got your aging fish from one stage to the next, right? So like you've got tiny little fries, right? You start out with babies and then you grow them up, and then eventually you get to a certain what you call stocking density. And essentially that's how much feed are you giving these fish? How much waste is that producing? Do you have enough plants in the system to absorb that waste? There is a fine balance that has to be reached. And that is one of the challenges of setting these systems up from the beginning, is saying like, okay, I'm going to have babies here. They're not going to produce a ton of nutrients. I can only have a few plants in the system. And then as they get bigger and you're growing more and there's more feed and more waste, you got to start adding in plants to compensate for that added waste. And then you finally reach a place where it's like everything's sort of in balance, right? Like, okay, fish are migrating through the system and aging up, and then you're moving crops through consistently. It's very much a delicate kind of nuanced thing, but absolutely you can sell the fish. That is a revenue source. It's just, do you have a market? What does that entail? I think one of the benefits of koi is that you don't have to actually kill fish. You sell them live, right? And then you transfer them to somebody. When you have to kill fish and create a food product out of it, there's a lot more regulations and permits and licenses and things to go through. So a little challenging there. Yeah.
Well, that does make sense in a way. And I've also heard from some people who are doing aquaponics with that. Yeah, I think tilapia and stuff like that. They said that the tilapia were kind of like break even. So, they were saying, you got to make sure you're making money off of the vegetable crops. So, I mean, that's an interesting option that I'd never thought of, is just don't sell the fish. They're just there to make fertilizers basically. So that, that might actually be that makes sense. If you don't have to go through the whole food regulatory process, maybe it makes sense for them just to to make fertilizer. Actually, speaking of making fertilizer, you said about nitrogen coming out of the gills. Can you tell me about that? Because I always thought that it's just pooping out the, it's just like basically fish poop is what your fertilizer is. I've never heard about nitrogen coming out of their gills.
Yeah, so this was actually a surprise to me, and I have to say that I am a floriculture guy. Like I am now. I wasn't when we started. I obviously have learned a lot in the time that we've been growing. We know how to grow flowers. That's kind of what we do. I am not an aquaculture guy. So when I started getting into aquaponics, I think I was under the perception or maybe the misperception that it was more about growing the plants. Well, the truth is the plants are kind of more tolerant than the fish are, really. You really have to become quite a good fish farmer, a good caretaker of your fish. Because if they go, the whole system crashes. And so ultimately, I had to learn a lot about how fish function. And one of the first things that I learned was because I, of course, was under the impression that they're peeing and they're pooping like every other organism, right? I mean, not on that scale of that size of an animal. This is how they're excreting their waste. And come to find out that they actually, the majority of their nitrogen waste, the ammonia that comes out of their bodies, is excreted through their gills. And it's really just about efficient exchange, this is like, they're obviously exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide in their systems, but it's also an efficient way to remove certain other compounds, right? So I just had no idea. It's just a fact of aquatic life. I just didn't know it. That's the reality of it. I know there's probably a lot more to it on a biochemical level. I haven't had the opportunity to delve into it, but that is the truth. Is a lot. The majority of their nitrogen waste is excreted through their gills, and then that's just solubilized in the water, and then that's the nitrogen that then is converted by the bacteria. And the bacteria are everywhere. They're in the water. They're in the water column. They're in the tank. They're on the surfaces of the tanks. One of the core features of the aquaponic system is the filter, the biofilter. So there's two elements of that filter. One is mechanical, which is separating out the solid waste from the liquid. And then the other one is biological, which is you've got all these little beads in this system. And the beads, they look like little grains of rice, and they act as an increased surface area for the bacteria to colonize and then facilitate a huge amount of that nitrogen, conversion that needs to happen. So that's ultimately that's the core feature of the whole thing, is this nitrification process that happens. So anyway, I could go on and on, man. I'm a total nerd.
I, on the other hand, am not a scientist, and I kind of glaze over myself when he starts talking like this. But I'm like, sure, whatever you say, sure.
Yeah. Trust the science.
Sure, that sounds great, honey.
Well, yeah, it is interesting. It's not something I know a whole lot about. Did you have to add the nitrifying bacteria to the system, or are they natural, like endemic? Are they naturally present?
Yeah, so they are naturally present, but to get so when you need a certain level of bacteria, we call that a quorum, right? Like, so essentially it's like you need a certain population of bacteria at a certain sort of what you might call concentration, I guess, or population density. You do need to inoculate the systems with nitrifying bacteria. And this is actually a common thing for anybody who runs an aquarium or, any kind of thing. You can buy like a solution that has these particular bacteria. Nitrosomonas, Nitrospira are two very common bacterial strains that do this. And they just put it in like a liquid inoculant that you can add to the system. That being said, getting that initial population up to a level where you can get proper nitrogen conversion, that takes time. Literally I spent a good 2 months trying to get my system up and running. It was challenging, but eventually you kind of have to just jump in, right? Like you kind of have to say, okay, screw it. We're going to add some fish and we're going to add the inoculant and cross our fingers a bit.
We went and bought like 12 fish because I was like, I don't want to kill are we going to kill the fish? And, he's like, I don't know. But I'm like, well, let's not just load it up. Like, let's just buy 12. Like, I don't want to kill like lots of fish. So, and they did fine.
They do. They're very resilient, but that is a unique challenge. So yeah, you do have to spike on the initial start.
Yeah. Okay. And I know you said that the system reaches some type of homeostasis, but I'm just curious, how often are you out there? Like, how involved of a management process is it? Are you taking water readings every single day and tweaking things, or is it? I mean, like, I guess even like, is the best case scenario? Is it self-managing and you're just kind of like checking in on it, or is it you tweaking things every day?
Oh, that is an excellent question. It takes active management, daily active management for sure. I've got probes that are in many elements of the system that check pH and temperature, because those are two of the more sort of core things that you've got to make sure. So obviously fish are what you call ectotherms, right? So they're regulating their body temperature from the water, right? Cold-blooded, I mean, would be another term, but it's kind of a misnomer. But basically they as the temperature of the water decreases, like it goes down, so like, and you start reaching into the 50 degrees range, 50 to 55, their metabolism slows down. Like they slow their body down, right? And say, don't metabolize as much. Well, that's bad for the system, right? And so you want their metabolism to be higher, so they're actually producing the waste and then, facilitating that nutrient flow. So temperature is something you always got to be looking at, which is why we spend a fortune on propane, which we're not happy about burning fossil fuels. But when you're first starting out, unfortunately, renewables are pretty costly. So propane's the way to do it. So we're heating the tanks, we're heating the water, and we're heating the greenhouse. pH is something we're always tweaking. You want to try and stay at around 7, a neutral pH. Plants, I think, want a more basic, so above 7 pH, and the fish, or maybe it's opposite. I think that's opposite. Fish want a more basic pH and the plants want a more acidic pH. And so you're trying to stay at around 7, but that takes some tweaking now and again to keep it where it needs to be, because they're both trying to drive it in opposite directions. So that's a challenge. So you got to be monitoring that. You should be monitoring your nitrogen levels and some of the other macronutrients. That's hard to do because there's really only barely a handful of things that you can use to test free nitrogen, nitrates, carbonates, certain things like that. And they're usually test strips, or they're like the API freshwater kits where you can do like liquid, tests. To test all the other micronutrients that you need, you have to send those samples off to a lab, and that is costly, unfortunately. Yeah. But that's what you actually, if you're running a tight, good, solid system that is in balance and constantly keeping your plants happy, you've got to be monitoring pretty consistently and making adjustments and adding. Sometimes you do have to add nutrients. It's just an unfortunate thing about these systems is until we've got certain controls dialed in, until we've got the feed, because ultimately what drives what's in the nutrients, it's what we're feeding the fish, right? So like if we're feeding them something that only gives a certain level of nutrients in the excreted waste, well, the plants are never going to get everything they need. So if we can figure out what to give the fish that can produce the right amount of nutrients for the plants, that's ideal. And so it's just a matter of figuring out what that is, and depending upon what you're growing. But anyway, yes, the answer to your question is we're constantly down there, constantly managing, constantly tweaking. Absolutely.
Okay.
There's no easy answers. I'm sorry. I wish I could explain these things in like 5 seconds, and it just doesn't happen.
No, we've got the time. I assume our audience is either commercial farmers or people who want to start a farm. And so, we wanted to make sure that we have time on this podcast. We can get nerdy, we can go deep on stuff. So awesome. I wanted the big answer. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate you. I appreciate you giving me the leeway.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, like you said, so, on your website, you say you're the only all-flower aquaponic operation that you know of, and I certainly haven't heard of another one. If hardly anyone is doing this, how did you think to connect the two and how did it become such an important part of what you do if nobody else is doing this?
Oh, that is also a really good question. It is. Well, look, I think... What? She clearly has an opinion.
I mean, I'm just going to say that when this all started, it started literally in our first year of growing. So I think my initial reaction to Tom when he started reading about aquaponics and just saying, I think I can build this, and I think I can grow flowers in a system like this, and it would be an amazing, sustainable opportunity to really explore. And, we were all about learning everything we could about organic soil based growing, no-till and all the things, we were definitely diving into all that. But my answer to him was, how much is it going to cost? Because I'm the one in the relationship that generally is just the sort of the buzzkill on Tom's very interesting creative ideas. And, maybe that's a good thing because there's some balance here, but he's an idea guy and he likes to explore ideas. And I decided, he spent some initial things to get like 50-gallon drums and create these DIY things. And, I would say maybe $1,000, $2,000 overall was spent on these. And when he wanted to scale it, I said, I am not opposed to that, but you're only going to do it if you get outside funding. That's the agreement. We are not in a position to just keep funding a project that is not generating any revenue.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It's a science experiment. I'm sorry, but that's what it is. And so, so I sort of put the kibosh on it. I figured, that would probably end it. However, Tom being stubborn and didn't like that, being told no, Tom went and found grants and successfully secured a $15,000 SARE grant to get the first initial pilot, experimental piece finished, and did that.
Let's give a shout out really quick to USDA SARE, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education.
They fund a lot of really great projects, and it's something, if listeners have a crazy idea that they want to try out on their farm, that's definitely worth looking into.
Yes, thank you, Andrew.
I mean, that was sort of the gateway drug into the now huge drug that Tom is taking, and I'm taking by proxy. Then he we received this huge grant from an organization in Maryland called TEDCO, which is a private and public funded tech enabling agency that really tries to get innovation businesses a leg up in the state of Maryland. And we got, upwards of almost $300,000 in grant money, and it was unrestricted because it was essentially derived from a lot of COVID relief funds. So the same kinds of restrictions that would come from a normal grant, we didn't have, which, allowed us to build this structure, but knowing that it was going to be 30 by 60 and knowing that at the time we were living on 1 acre.
Right. Yeah.
And we were growing on some adjacent horse property behind us, which we were leasing, but there was no way we were putting this huge greenhouse on that tiny little property, residential property. Right. So that grant precipitated the expansion of everything. I mean, everything changed because we had to go find a new property. We didn't intend on buying 34 acres, but we just happened upon a 34-acre lot, which met the criteria for us to get access to a land acquisition grant, which we had to fight really hard for, but we ended up getting. So it's just kind of ballooned into where we are now, which is this beautiful property that we have.
And the system and the greenhouse are amazing. I mean, it's super high tech. Now,
Tom, let me just also say one other thing. And I say this in a lot of podcasts, but, as much as my husband can drive me nuts with his ideas, and, the now unfunded mandates that go along with this greenhouse, which, whatever. But I also appreciate the fact that he is operating in a sea by himself right now. And that kind of innovation and exploration is not easy to do on your own. It's not easy because even the people in aquaponics space that support this project are veggie growers, right? So there's a limitation to how much support they can really give him. He's had to branch out and meet with scientists in floriculture and aquaculture and just literally almost amass a brand new team of people to think about how to do this successfully.
Sounds like it.
And that it has been a huge undertaking. So I'm really proud of him for that, in light of the fact that, he's got a lot of naysayers, many, many, many who said this will never work. You'll never grow flowers in this system. You'll never be able to get the micronutrient profile correct to even have anything bloom. And I would say he has grown well over 40 different cultivars in that system to bloom with really no problem.
Yeah.
I as much as I'm a skeptic, like everyone else, and I am, and I'm the one that's kind of always going.
She believes in me more than others.
I do, but I'm the one that's like, show me the money. Yeah, show me the money.
Well, that's challenging because you're talking about R&D. You're talking about research, and research is hard because it takes. There's faith involved. You have to say, okay, I have a good idea. The science is sound. The foundation is there. It just hasn't been explored. And to answer your question, Andrew, about why this space and why is nobody doing it? Well, it's just like so many other things, right? Like there's only so much bandwidth. There's only so much manpower, to go after certain things. And the food issue is so pressing and so essential to our future that it's taken all the focus, and as well it should. I definitely agree that but that's why floriculture is so overlooked, is because food just dominates the conversation. And ultimately the beauty of what we're doing is that we're trying to develop the technology, but it is applicable to any crop. It's there. We're working on aspects of these systems that will improve the overall performance of the technology, and that can be applicable to both flowers and to food. But ultimately, there are unique challenges to flowers that you don't have in food, and vice versa, right? Food has some challenges that flowers don't have. One of the primary issues that comes with food production is the biosecurity aspects, right? So we've seen it before with field-grown spinach, right? Like we've had E. coli outbreaks because wastewater has been contaminating irrigation water. Well, now any of these indoor farms that's working in these systems has to sterilize every single drop of irrigation water that goes onto the crops or is exposed to the crops, even though the chances of that happening in an indoor system is pretty slim. They still are beholden to those regulations. And so flowers don't have that. Flowers don't have that requirement because nobody eats them, right? Now, again, it's just a different mindset about, what is more valuable and what should we focus on. But that's really why we went into this area. I saw an opportunity where nobody was working. And when you see that, you're like, hey, this is it. First of all, it's exciting because you feel like you're breaking new ground. You feel like you're a trailblazer exploring, new space, which is fun. That's what a researcher lives for, to do stuff like that.
Yes. Well, it sounds like you're figuring out some things that are going to be useful to other people down the road. I also want to ask you about the farm. I saw there's a huge change there recently on your website that you went from the 1 acre property, like you said, to a 34 acre farm in 2022, which is, must feel like, we're only in the beginning of 2024 here. It must feel like it was just yesterday, just thinking about how many things have to come together with a new property. Can you tell us how it's going with the new bigger farm?
Yeah, in a nutshell, we had to get the funding secured to be able to get the property. And then when we moved here, there was a house on this property and a shed, and there's a great big pond. But basically, the rest of it was a pretty large, like 15 to 17 acres in the front of the property that was essentially being, used for hay. They were leasing the space for hay. And so there had been no agricultural production at all on this property for, I think, since it's been around. I don't think they've ever really cultivated it for crop production in any way. So when we got here, not only did we need to build the greenhouse and create a complete farm plan, but we had to create brand new fields production, flora rows. We increased probably by 5 times the amount of space that we were growing in before. We had to put in a deer fence. We had to build a pavilion with a walk-in cooler. We have 2 hoop houses, 30 by 90 that have been installed for shoulder production. We had to get electric. We had to get a new well. We've planted in one space that is not deer protected, but we haven't really had any deer pressure there, is about 15,000 dahlia plants. And so, we are, in less than 2 years, actually just 2 years, we just moved here. Well, actually not yet, because we actually didn't move until the end of February of 2022. Yeah. It hasn't even been 2 years. And, it has been quite an undertaking to scale to this extent, which is tricky, because when you scale a project like that very fast, we already had a market, and we definitely still do, where we can move a lot of this product. That's not been a huge problem. It's just about expanding that customer base. This year we'll have 3 farmers markets every week. We sell to a fairly robust group of floral designers who deal with Washington, D.C. weddings. So there's epically good market in this space, because there's no shortage of money being thrown around in Washington, D.C. and surrounding areas.
You mentioned that in your intro, right, about the fact that we are in the orbit of one of the more sort of, robust economies in the U.S., specifically because it's that government funding, right? It's somewhat recession proof. It's always there. And it trusts us. We
love the market. We live in an agricultural reserve. We've got the restrictions here regarding development are really nice, because you can only build a residential structure every 25 acres. Yeah. So they've preserved the agricultural landscape within literally 20 miles of Washington, D.C. So, and a lot of people think of Washington, D.C. as just a city, but ironically enough, there's a lot of beautiful surrounding natural, gorgeous beauty in this space. And we happen to live right in the smack dab in the middle of a Montgomery County ag space, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
So we're really lucky in that respect. The property that we're on is stunning. There's a lot of potential, and we have already started to explore workshops and on-farm U-Pick events, and trying to open up our space so that the community around us and locally to us can take advantage of walking around in rows and rows and rows of blooming flowers. It's pretty spectacular when it's in bloom.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people get to experience that in their lifetime.
That is absolutely a unique aspect of flower farming, right? Like, yes, we don't want a field full of colorful flowers, because that's a product that needs to get sold, right? You got to cut those things.
If you've got a field full of color, you're probably not selling it.
You're doing it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
But conversely, there's only so much you can keep up with, and also there is an intention about, like, you can plant relatively easily some smaller fields that are just for that purpose of bringing people into it. It's just not the same as, like, hey, walk through my field of lettuce. It's like, it just doesn't have the same appeal as a flower.
But one of the things that we've been committed to, that the farmers markets have given us access direct to consumer educational opportunities. Yeah. And I would say that having a space now, which we didn't have before when we lived on 1 acre, but to have a space that has the capacity to continue to educate people about where their flowers are growing, that just opens up a whole nother aspect of education around to the consumer, which, quite honestly, once the consumers start to demand something different, that's when things really start to change.
Let's give a shout out to Slow Flowers.
Yeah, Deborah Prinzing is...
So we got involved with Slow Flowers.
We blame Deborah for all of this
very early on.
Because we went in our first year.
Blame is
blame in quotes. We went to the Slow Flower Summit, which just serendipitously was happening here in DC. Hasn't been here since then. We didn't even know what it was. We didn't know who she was. We didn't know anything, and we were like, "Oh, we should go to this conference." And it was the first time we even had been introduced to the idea of slow flowers, the idea that, things should be grown sustainably and locally, and even the problems within the floral industry and what a dirty industry it is. We didn't know any of that. And so that was sort of set the stage for us, because it was like,
we got in on the ground floor.
Once you know that, you can't unknow it.
Yeah.
And so it changed everything from the very beginning, which was really kind of cool.
Yeah. So yeah, we've been evangelizing.
Yeah. Slow Flowers is a great organization.
Yeah. But and ultimately the seasonal and local push that I think food has been enjoying for, quite a while now. It's not been forever, but you guys, food has definitely had had more time to sort of, encourage that all, just that aspect. Flowers are just behind. And so we've just got to continue pushing and promoting that mindset. And the farmers markets have been just insanely valuable for that direct grassroots outreach. That's one of the brilliant things about farmers markets. It can be lucrative, but it is that direct communication line to the consumer that you just can't replicate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does seem like, flowers are having a huge growth right now. I think, it is. It is kind of like the locavore movement, happening with food. I want to say 10 or 15 years ago. Seems like that's going on with flowers right now, and that's why it's so important to talk about the business aspect of everything, right? Because there's so much enthusiasm behind flowers right now. We want people to think about their bottom line so they don't just burn out and they can keep the passion going. So
definitely.
Well, speaking of that, so I want to talk about your market. So it sounds like you're selling to farmers markets and to florists. Is that where all the flowers? Is there anything else you guys are doing? Is that where all the flowers are going?
We're kind of right now, honestly, since our business has shifted so much in the last 2 years, I would say we continue to explore and experiment with all kinds of potential revenue streams. I mean, obviously the foundation of our business in terms of revenue generation is farmers markets and selling directly wholesale to floral designers, most of whom are doing wedding events design.
And some brick and mortar florists, but
not
primarily
as many.
Designers.
And then, in addition to that, we've had on-farm workshops that we offer. We have a retail component to our website. We do like a big amaryllis sale push in the fall, and we've done some nationwide shipping around things like that. We've done some shipping of flowers through FedEx. It hasn't been a huge part of our business, but we have done that also. We have a CSA here locally that we're doing, a bouquet CSA, which has been pretty successful. We're having a plant sale in the spring of both natives and non-native floral and grass varieties. So we're kind of, trying to do a lot of different things, and just, we do a big analysis at the end of each year. Tom and I go away on what we call our retreat, and we literally go through our numbers. That's what we do. We open up QuickBooks. Not that we don't do that during the year, but this is the time when we start really reviewing reports, really diving into metrics around what worked, what didn't sell very well, what is the marketing strategy, what were the margins on that, what are things we keep, what are the things we scrap. We're not going to just spin our wheels doing all the things, but we need to try enough to sort of get that data, and then we keep refining as we go. So I would say it feels like the last 2 years has been like we started over, to be honest, because we started in 2018. For the first 2 years, we were just learning. Then we had a pandemic, and everything changed for everyone, right? And then on the heels of the pandemic, we made a huge move. So it kind of feels like we've been in it for 6 years, but we're really only been in it. It feels like we've only been in it for about 3. To be honest. And I think in terms of actually trying to run a business.
Yeah. And I think, obviously that is one of the key aspects of what we're doing. Sarah has really, really gotten good at this. This was not her training. Obviously she's as a lawyer, but since the beginning of the company, she's dived fully into sales and marketing and social media, because it's just, you have to. And she's been really effective at building our Instagram following, which Instagram is sort of the key platform for florals because of just the aesthetic aspect of it. And then also just learning how to engage new customers, acquire new customers, get more floral designers involved, and create those relationships. Just so critical. And the thing that we hear repeatedly is that flower farmers, and probably farmers in general, don't do that very well. They're great growers. They know how to grow a great product, but they just don't do a lot of outreach and marketing for their products, right? It's just not something they're used to doing or want to do or whatever. So there's that. And then one of the real key aspects, I think, for us, especially if we're going to scale this technology and produce at a much larger volume, is we have to find larger accounts. We have to find larger customers. And the place naturally to go is the flower distributors, the wholesale distributors that are already doing imported product, and trying to get them converted over and buying more local product. And there are some receptive companies out there that really do want to move in this direction. And so talking to them, getting relationships generated, trying to come up with like contract growing, perhaps options. We both have been very mindful and proactive in that aspect of our business, which is, if we're going to make some money doing this, you're going to have to move a whole lot of flowers, whole lot. Now, where are you going to sell those? I mean, there's designers for sure, but let's think about all of the different ways in which we can sell our product.
Yeah, one, and I appreciate you talking about that, because I feel like with some people, there's an attitude almost like, I don't know if it's like they think it's going to kill the passion to talk too much about the money or the profit. But, we're a magazine and a podcast for farmers who are trying to make a living doing this. And it's really important to talk about that the balance sheet doesn't just take care of itself. You have to be intentional about like what you said. And I can see how, I can see how it must be almost a whole different business to go from, having an acre total, and then now you have this whole different setup. I can see how it might almost be remaking the business.
It definitely is. It is. And what would have been successful on 1 acre in some leased land may not work any longer for 34 acres and a lot more overhead. Right. So, as any business scales, you've got to make modifications to all the pieces of it, because it can't just operate on now a huge scaling project with more overhead, but the same sales channel model. Right. You've got to start exploring other ways to do this. And I will say also that one of the frustrations that I have is that, and it's not it's a frustration. It's a reality, I think, that we're starting to observe, is that for those farmers that are making a living, very few of them are doing it just on cut flowers, right? The ones that are actually, out there making a living, they're selling classes, they're selling books, they're selling seeds and tubers and
nursery. They have a nursery.
There's some seedlings. Other thing, that they're doing that is monetized to help support the flower business. The actual cut flowers alone are probably not going to be enough for anyone to live on and create a livable wage in flower farming. And I think that is the reality that we face, and the one that we're trying to meet with a lot of creative ideas and things. It might look a little chaotic to those from the outside looking in, going like, well, what are you guys doing? But it's like, what we're doing is we're trying to figure out what works.
Yeah, actively refining.
And it's going to constantly probably change as the business continues to change. Yeah. But that's just the nature of business. You're always coming up with new ideas and new ways to try to
diversify.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important.
Yeah, it's really important. And it needs to be more sexy, right? It needs to be okay to say, I'm a farmer and I want to make a good living. And we need to be less apologetic about, and this is what that blog post was about asking for money. Yeah. Venture capitalists, people who are doing startup companies in any other field there's no shame in asking for outside funding to help you get off the ground. People do this all day, every day in Silicon Valley. No one thinks anything of asking for several $1 million to start a company. it's not done as frequently in farming, but that needs to shift.
There's and I wonder if there's this mindset out there about farming, because farming has it's obviously a very ancient tradition of I guess you could say a career, but it's really more of almost a cultural thing, right? Like there's just entire whole communities that are just built on this concept of agriculture. And I think that because of that, sometimes it's hard for people to view it as a business and more just like a lifestyle or like a passion. And again, they have trouble marrying the two things. And so I think ultimately Sarah and I's goal, and this is something that, again, would probably take an entire new podcast, or I don't know, probably even more than that, but trying to encourage the next generation of farmers, like who's going to take over and farm, because they're aging out, this previous generation, and like not a lot of people want to farm. And how do we encourage that? Yeah,
absolutely. And that's why we want to keep talking about profitability and how to make it, because we want to see the people who are enthusiastic about it.
Right. The people who don't want to farm, why don't they want to farm? Like that's the question. Why wouldn't someone want to farm? Because you have to work your butt off and you don't get really paid very much money. I mean, it's a pretty simple equation.
Yeah.
Right. If you could make a decent livable wage, you might be able to encourage people to not leave this profession and go try and find money somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, that's the hope, I think. And I think what we're finding, and sort of to loop back to our original conversation about all of the advocacy and work that we've been doing on grant funding and meeting with politicians. And I mean, like literally the last several months has been going to Annapolis, meeting with politicians, get hundreds of Zoom calls. I mean, it's been insane. But, I think what Tom and I are kind of at our limit with this idea that people shake their head and agree with us about agriculture being so important, but nobody's really willing to put the cash in to put their money where their mouth is. And that's true both in the private equity space, and it's also true in grant funding. Not enough money is set aside from the government in ways to support small scale farming. Like you said, the big ag is getting all the money, and they're putting money into the things that actually are making us all sick, which is the irony here of all of it. So
we have a lot of opinions, Andrew.
We do. We're very opinionated.
Yeah. Well, it's important. And I do think it's like when you look at the amount of money that big ag gets with subsidies, all these sustainable ag programs I feel like sometimes are almost like an afterthought, with the amount of money is compared to what's going to big ag. And so I think also just so few people are actually farmers anymore. I think, most people don't really understand where their food comes from and the importance of how it's produced, and flowers for that matter. So, it's a bit of an uphill battle, but I'm glad you guys are fighting it.
We are.
On maybe a little bit more of a fun note, you guys are still doing the Falls Church Farmers Market?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, I know this interview is not about me, it's about you, but that's it. When I looked on your website and saw you guys were doing Falls Church, that was really fun for me, because that's actually where I grew up in Virginia. And in fact, that was the first farmers market that my farm did. If people have been listening to the podcast for a while know that we're up in Maine now, but when we originally started our farm in Pennsylvania on some family land, our whole idea was to grow stuff kind of like out in the middle of nowhere and then truck it down to this good market in the the DC metro area. And so that was the very first farmers market, the Falls Church Farmers Market, and it's a great one. It is. People are in the DC metro area, go see Grateful Gardeners at the Falls Church Farmers Market. But that was just so much fun for me to see on your website that you guys
we love that market.
It's a small world.
We actually we got into that market in large part at the recommendation of a flower grower in this area named Barbara Lamborn with Greenstone Fields, who had been growing flowers and had been at that market exclusively for over 20 years. And she's a phenomenal grower. And, we just feel really fortunate to have been given the opportunity, because when we got accepted there, we were not had just moved and like we really hadn't scaled to the point where we felt like we could just, bring enough product to a robust market like that. But we've grown into it, and the market managers, they're amazing.
The people
that come to that market. We have regular customers that come every week. They'll buy stuff from us, even if we don't have anything.
Right.
They'll be like, what do you have? We're going to just buy something, and they've become friends.
That's
many of
That's
them.
an amazing feeling as a business owner.
Yeah. They've been so supportive, and I can't imagine not going to that market.
Yeah.
We love it.
Yep. It's a good one.
Yeah, it is. It's a great little farmer's market. Actually, it's probably bigger than the last time I was there. I know that whole area is blowing up. Like you said, I think because the federal government, that whole, people call it the DMV, the District, Maryland, Virginia. It seems like that area just always grows, and so it's probably even bigger than. It's been a few years since I've been there. We're pretty far away now, but it's probably even bigger than it used to be. Well, we've been chatting for a while, but I want to make sure and ask you a little bit about your crops. So, are you growing a little bit of everything? Are there certain crops that have particular importance in your system?
We do flower farming. Well, I wouldn't say we do flower farming wrong. But we do something that is not advised, which is, and this is a problem with a lot of, I think, farmers, you want to grow all the things, right? Like you want to grow all the interesting stuff. You want to grow the things that are maybe something that nobody's ever seen or tried, and unfortunately that means you get spread too thin, obviously, and you're trying to grow all the things. Last year, we grew in excess of 150 varieties of flowers, and you really shouldn't be growing any more than 50.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot.
It is.
It's a lot. I mean, I think that, our thing is we want to grow the sexy stuff, the stuff that, especially for floral designers, that they can't get anywhere else. They certainly wouldn't be able to get it from a wholesaler. I would say if you were to identify, our primary crops, though, we spend a lot of energy on dahlias. That's probably far and away our most lucrative and our most prolific crop. And it's one that's great for us because we love the flower and we love growing it. The diversity of the crop is amazing. She's a high maintenance girl. She requires a lot of time and attention, and she's prone to all of the pests and all the things, but when she's in bloom and hits her stride in September of every year, it's like nothing you've ever seen before to be standing amongst 15,000 blooming dahlia plants. I mean, it's pretty outstanding. We had a U-Pick event on our farm for the first time. We opened our flower fields to the public, and then we've never done that before. And I was a nervous wreck, thinking that all these people were going to be, schlepping and traipsing over our flowers. And it ended up being a very controlled, wonderful group. And it was probably the highlight of our season, to be honest. It was a beautiful day. People came out. They really were just like, I'd never seen so much joy on people's faces before in one day. It was just outstanding. So we grow other things in fairly high production,
ranunculus, snapdragons,
Lysianthus.
Peonies are a great option for perennials because you can charge a huge amount for those per stem. They have their 6-week window of time that they bloom, but when you can really, if you have a lot of those plants, you can make some pretty serious bank in a short amount of time. And then there are other perennials. Perennial growth is really pretty nice because you plant them and there's very little maintenance and care, and they come back each year and usually expand.
Last year we did a kind of interesting thing that, I've never been a huge sunflower girl because I've always thought they were kind of pedestrian, but we ended up growing about 12 different varieties of sunflowers.
Yeah, they have some sexy varieties
in rapid succession, right? So they were just one, every 2 weeks we were planting the same 12 varieties. And so for weeks and weeks and weeks, we had all of these really interesting sunflowers that no one had ever seen before in our markets. They're like, what is this? I've never seen a sunflower look like this. So we always try to do something with an eye toward It's not something you'll ever see at a grocery store. It's not even something you'll see from a veggie farmer who tries to come and boost their sales with their zinnias and their sunflowers and their celosia in the summer, which is another pet peeve of ours. Sorry, veggie farmers, but
Yeah.
but we grow different things. We don't specialize in things that are just cut and come again, easy things you can just direct seed. I mean, they're a little bit more nuanced, and that I think is,
we want to have fun too. Like we I don't think we could ever really get to a place where we were growing, just like 10 things. I mean, it's just too much fun to experiment and try new crops,
Plus, I think the thing that is one thing that Tom and I have been committed to from the beginning is that while we sell direct to consumer, and I think there's less of they love flowers, certainly, but our floral designers are artists. And honestly, they're creating art with floral, with live product, perishable product. And the more diversity that you can give them in the product, the more incredible their art is with it. And that is one of the most satisfying things of being able to fulfill a floral wholesale order to a designer, and then look at what they create with your flowers, and you get all the beautiful photographs afterwards. That's pretty amazing. So
special feeling.
We gear a lot of our growing with sort of like that in mind, because we know that floral designers really like that diversity that they cannot get from a wholesale company. So that's the beauty of local too, is that you can grow things that wouldn't ship, but that are just as beautiful and abundant seasonally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, it's going to be fresher than something that came in on a plane.
So, best quality.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there are definitely angles that are really important like that for local growers to work, to take some of that market share away from the imported stuff.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you really have to sort of niche down, but the first question to ask yourself is, who is the customer? Right? Because if you identify who the customer is, your crop plan is going to be, derived from what you think the demand might be, and how you can set yourself apart from your competition, which in our minds is not the other local growers. It's the wholesaler who is bringing in all the imports. Right. What can we sell, and what can we provide that they cannot produce? That's what makes us more competitive. And I think anyone who's growing in flowers, at least, should be thinking about that first before they start thinking about just going to a farm. I mean, going to a farmer's market is great, but if you want to sell to floral designers, you've got to get more creative about what you're growing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so all that stuff, including all the thousands of dahlias, that's all in the aquaponics system, or is there any field production?
Oh no, this is all everything we pretty much mentioned to you is field production. The aquaponics system is still very much a pilot phase where we're doing relatively small scale. Right now, we're focused on Lisianthus as a crop, which is a real good. It's a solid crop to grow because it has a super long base life.
Super important for
high dollar per stem. It can be a good rose substitute because it has a similar kind of shape and structure and form. So most of what we just described is out in the field right now. Obviously, if we can move some of these crops into aquaponics and grow them year round, dahlias year round in aquaponics would be, oh my God, we'd make bank. We'd make so much money.
It's problematic though, because you have to find a crop that actually doesn't take up too much space, right? Because space is a commodity in that system. So things that can grow upright and you can pack them in pretty tightly. Lisianthus is one crop. Snapdragons would be another that comes to mind. Something like that. Maybe dianthus, or not dianthus, but delphinium. Things like that would probably be more suited. Dahlias are just they require some spacing, which
I think that's part of the R&D. That's part of the R&D. Like you got to figure out like what would it take to grow certain types of crops in these systems, right? Because it just never been done, So
right.
Yeah, I was going to say we have a little section of delphinium right now in our system that looks absolutely happy as a clam. I mean, it's growing like crazy, and I'm starting to just see signs of buds. So, we're constantly just throwing different things in and seen what marigolds, which are not a huge high dollar crop, but marigolds are like the happiest plant I've ever seen in anything. I mean, they grow so much better in aquaponics than they do in the field. They're outstanding. I must have cut on those things for six months in that system with no sign of stopping.
Wow.
It was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. But yeah, I can see how Lisianthus would make sense because you can really cram that in there. And maybe I'm wondering if you might see some advantage, or maybe you already have, with as you know, you can sometimes get longer stem length, right, by crowding plants. So I'm wondering if you might maybe you've already seen that, or that you might see that you might be able to crowd some crops a little more than they sometimes are in the field, and maybe get acceptable stem length out of some that are kind of like borderline, or have it work out that way, as long as the airflow is really good.
Yeah, if I could get long and strong stems on a pansy, and grow it prolifically in an aquaponics system, that would be amazing. Because every floral designer would love to be able to use those because they're so outstanding. But they're just generally bedding plants. It's very hard to sort of push that crop into a different way of being. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to experiment and play with.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let us know when you figured that out, how to grow an aquaponic pansy and tight spacing. We'll definitely be interested in that.
Will do.
Well, we've been talking for a good long time now, but I wanted to just make sure and ask a little bit about what you guys see for the future, because it sounds like you've put a lot of planning into like the grants you're trying to get, and of course you're fairly new on that property. Can you just give an idea what, if you could get all the grants funded, or keep things growing the way that you'd like, what's the vision for the future there at Grateful Gardeners?
Our visions are a little bit different. Sort of. Well, maybe not.
No, I don't think they're different.
Well, I'll tell you my vision, and I'll let Tom will talk about his. My vision for this property and our life and our business would be to have this property be a destination spot for, both farming, agriculture, sustainability, and art, innovation, and exploration. Right. So if money were no problem and I had endless funds, I would build an incredible barn here with space for, educational opportunities, both in art and exploring floriculture and different art mechanisms and crafts and all kinds of things to allow this to be a creative space. And I think that the property itself is screaming for that because there's so much beauty on it, natural and otherwise. We have a huge pond in our backyard. We have a stream. I mean, it's a stunning place to explore. And, I don't know how profitable those things might be, but it would be great for me to explore that. That's a vision and a dream that I have.
Yeah. I mean, I think that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful vision.
Yeah. No, it really is. I mean, I think that ultimately we have two sides of our souls, I guess. I mean, more so really the passion about nature and the passion about the environment and trying to create a space that sort of allows people. I'm a big fan of something called biophilia, which is basically like nature therapy. This whole idea that we need to be in nature and our bodies sort of naturally heal themselves and recenter themselves when they're in nature. And so I think creating a space that can facilitate that kind of thing is really important to Sarah and I. But unfortunately, that is essentially a bit of a nonprofit kind of a vision, and I think that what we've realized is that we have to have a profitable, pretty significantly profitable business that can then drive and support some of the things that are still meaningful to us, but are not a profitable kind of thing. And so that's really why the two businesses, I think, exist. I mean, I think that Grateful Gardeners gives us the opportunity to potentially do those things. And then Floraponics gives us the chance to generate the profit that can allow us to do the stuff that we really, really care about and it's just really super meaningful to us. So that's the vision. But
Andrew, have you ever been to Stone Barns up in New York?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
okay. That would be something that would be, I mean, obviously that's way more bougie than even I would expect, but to have a space where people can explore, but you think about that and you think, okay, so what's supporting that? I mean, Rockefeller money, right? I mean, here you go. It's sort of like, generational wealth, right? It's sort of like, well, somehow, but that the vision there and what they're doing in terms of research and growing and sustainability and exploring art, all the things. We had a conference there with Deborah Prinzing a couple of years ago with the Slow Flowers group, and it did blow our minds. We just were so impressed with that. So some variation of something like that would be like amazing. Ideal. Yeah.
That would be amazing. And so maybe you don't actually build the barn out of stone like they did, but I mean, I would think they're in the DC area where you are. That would be amazing to have a venue where people could come out and see the actual flower production and like you said, learn, or I don't know if, weddings, but it seems like there's so many people right there that, I mean, I think that's a great vision. I want to come visit. So,
you're invited.
You're invited.
All right. Well, I'll let you know the next time I'm down there, and we'll see if it's a good time. Well, you've told us about the past, the present, and the future. Is there anything else that I should have asked you about, or that you'd like to tell us about before we wrap up?
I don't want to tell you anything. I just want to, this space seems to accompany a lot of people who are maybe more veggie focused than flower focused. But I would love to hear from people who are doing, I hope that people listen to this and feel maybe that they could reach out, or that we could continue to connect with other farms, irrespective of what they're growing. I just think that anyone who is farming in any capacity right now benefits from, knowing one another and sharing information. So I hope that happens.
Yeah. I think just a good place to end for us is our Grateful Gardeners company, the 3-word sort of mission / mantra that we always try and come back to is local, sustainable, collaborative. And so obviously the local and sustainable is pretty self-explanatory. The collaborative is like, people are like, well, what do you mean? And it's like, really what it means is like, we just want to connect with people, and we want to connect with other people who are focused on similar kinds of things and are aligned. And I think that's part of agriculture and farming that I think maybe, there's always this concept of like a farmer being somewhat kind of isolated. They're out on their tractor alone, and they don't really have a lot of, they're more connected with the plants than anything. And I feel like farming needs to be much more of a sort of social, let's get together. Now, farmers definitely stick together. There's no question about that. But I think we need to connect with our consumers. We need to connect with the people that are passionate about the same kinds of things, even though they might not be in farming. So I as with Sarah, I would encourage anybody out there who wants to connect with us, please do so. And we obviously want to support other people's efforts and their projects and how we can. Obviously, we can't do everything, and we're pretty stretched pretty thin right now. But our hope is, in the not too distant future, we can be much more supportive, and do a lot more because we care a lot about it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a great vision. And I mean, that's what, Growing for Market magazine's been around for 33 years with farmers basically sharing their own stories. And that's one thing I think is really great about the small farming community is that farmers tend to be sharing. And I don't know if it's because we're more like local ag, and so we're not worried about competing with the farmer in, California or the Midwest, or even, like a county or two away. But, I think that is, one thing about our audience is that they may be completely isolated, be the only one that they know doing what they're doing. And, hopefully we can connect through the magazine and the podcast and things like that, or maybe they have a great community. But either way, I think the most innovative people in farming are the farmers. And so that's why this podcast is here, and that's why the magazine is. And I really appreciate that sentiment. So on that note, where can people find you if they want to, how do you want people to connect with you, social media, online, or wherever you want people to look you up?
Yeah, so we have a website, which is gratefulgardeners.co, not com. So that's an important distinction.
Couldn't get the .com.
Couldn't get the .com, so it's gratefulgardeners.co. And we have ways for you to drop us an email and things like that there. We also are pretty active on social media. We have an Instagram account, which is grateful_gardeners, where people can connect with us, send us a DM, see us there. We also, people can send us a direct email. We are on TikTok, but not as actively. LinkedIn. I mean, we kind of sort of have all the socials, and we have a Facebook page, which we're not very active on, but it's there.
Instagram is really the
place. But
yeah, especially
so I just, you can find us.
We're out there.
We're here, and we don't have anyone doing our work for us. I mean, if you receive an answer from us, it's one of the two of us has done it. So,
and we're very responsive.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. All right. Well, good. People can know where to get hold of you if they want to know more. And well, I really appreciate the time. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and it's very interesting to me what you guys are doing down there. So
thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing it with me and our audience, and I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks,
Andrew.
so much.
We appreciate it. You.
All right. Thanks.